The first time I signed a paper saying I would be my boss's husband for 1 year, I thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't know I was also walking toward the one person who would finally make me feel like I mattered. My name is Daniel, and at 24, I was used to being the person people overlooked. I worked long hours as an assistant at a luxury company owned by Victoria Hale, a woman whose name appeared everywhere: business magazines, interviews, charity events. People described her as brilliant, untouchable, and impossible to impress. They weren't wrong. Victoria was in her mid-40s, always perfectly dressed, always calm, always 3 steps ahead of everyone around her. But what people didn't see was the quiet moments after meetings ended. The way she stared out of office windows when she thought nobody was watching. The way she sometimes held her coffee without drinking it, like her mind was somewhere far away. I noticed those things because I was always the person standing in the background. Our story didn't begin with a grand romantic moment. It started with a broken coffee machine. One rainy evening, I was still in the office finishing paperwork when I heard a frustrated sigh coming from the private kitchen area. Victoria was standing there, looking at the machine like it had personally offended her. "You're still here?" she asked. I looked up from my laptop. "I could ask you the same thing." For a second, she looked surprised. Most people didn't talk to her that way. Then, something unexpected happened. She smiled. Not the polite smile she gave investors or employees. A real one. "You're brave for someone who fixes my printer twice a week," she said. I laughed quietly. I wouldn't call it brave. I'd call it survival. That was the first time I saw her relax around me. After that night, small things started changing. She remembered how I took my coffee. She asked about my family. She noticed when I looked tired and told me to go home before I even realized I needed rest. Nobody had ever paid attention to those details about me. Not like that. But Victoria had her own reasons for needing a husband, even if it was only temporary. A 1-year marriage agreement. A business decision. A simple arrangement with clear rules. No emotions. No complications. At least, that was what we told ourselves. The first time she handed me the contract, her fingers paused against mine for a second longer than necessary. "You understand this is only for 1 year?" she asked softly. I looked at her face. For the first time, she didn't look like the powerful billionaire everyone feared. She looked nervous. Like she was waiting for me to walk away. "I understand," I said. But the truth was, I wasn't sure what scared me more, becoming her fake husband, or realizing that a part of me already wanted to be something more. A week later, standing outside the courthouse with rain falling around us, Victoria reached for my hand. Her grip was gentle. Almost uncertain. Then she leaned closer and whispered something that made my heart stop. "Daniel, before you sign this, there's something about my past you need to know." I looked at her. And in that moment, I realized this 1-year marriage was never going to be as simple as we planned. I thought the hardest part would be pretending to be married to Victoria Hale. I was wrong. The hardest part was realizing how easy it was to forget we were pretending. After we signed the papers, everything changed overnight. The same woman who used to sit across from me in a glass office, giving instructions that made entire departments move, was suddenly the person I came home to. Our home. Even saying that word felt strange. The first few days were uncomfortable. We were two people sharing a beautiful apartment while carefully staying on opposite sides of an invisible line. Victoria kept herself busy. Too busy. She took calls late at night. She reviewed documents during breakfast. She filled every quiet moment with something because silence seemed to make her uncomfortable. I noticed everything about her. The way she removed her earrings the second she walked through the door, like she was taking off the weight of the day. The way she checked her phone but looked disappointed when there was nothing there. The way she would sometimes stand near the window for several minutes, completely lost in thought. One evening, I found her sitting alone in the dark living room. No laptop. No business meeting. Just her. "Are you okay?" I asked. She quickly turned on the lamp. "I'm fine." It was the kind of answer people gave when they hoped nobody would ask again. I sat across from her. "You don't have to act like you're fine around me." For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she laughed quietly. "You know what's strange, Daniel?" "What?" "You're the first person in years who says things to me without wanting something afterward." I didn't know how to respond. Because I wasn't sure if that was true. I wanted something. I wanted to understand her. And that scared me. Victoria was still my boss. The person who signed my paycheck. The woman everyone admired but nobody truly knew. And I was just Daniel. The assistant who accidentally became her husband. That night, she told me about the pressure she had carried for years. About how everyone expected perfection from her. About how exhausting it was to always be the strongest person in the room. But she never mentioned the one thing she almost said. The name of the person who had hurt her. The person from her past. I noticed her hand tighten around her coffee cup when her phone lit up. She saw the name on the screen. And her expression changed. Only for a second. But I saw it. "Who was that?" I asked. She turned the phone face down. "Nobody." I knew she was lying. But I also knew she wasn't ready. Later that night, I was heading toward my room when I heard her voice behind me. "Daniel?" I turned around. She was standing there, looking less like a billionaire and more like someone afraid of being left alone. "Could you stay for a little while?" I froze. Because the way she said it wasn't a request about the contract. It sounded like something much more dangerous. Something neither of us was supposed to want. I should have walked away that night. That would have been the smart thing to do. Victoria was my boss. The woman who had hired me, trusted me, and now depended on me to play a role that was never supposed to become real. But when she asked me to stay, I didn't see the billionaire everyone else saw. I saw a woman sitting alone in a quiet room, trying to convince herself she didn't need anyone. So I stayed. For a while, neither of us spoke. The rain tapped against the windows, filling the silence between us. You ever feel like your whole life belongs to other people? She asked suddenly. I looked at her. She was staring at the floor, twisting a ring around her finger. People think because you're successful, you're free, she continued. But sometimes success just gives people more reasons to expect things from you. I didn't know what to say. Because I understood more than I wanted to. I know what it feels like to be invisible, I said quietly. Her eyes lifted toward me. Daniel. I mean it. People look at what I do, not who I am. I'm always useful. Always needed. But rarely noticed. Something changed in her expression. Like those words reached a place she didn't expect them to. You notice too much, she whispered. I smiled slightly. Maybe you hide too much. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. The space between us suddenly felt different. Not empty. Not comfortable. Something else. Victoria reached for the coffee cup on the table at the same moment I did. Our fingers touched. It was barely a second. A small accident. But neither of us pulled away immediately. Her eyes met mine. And for the first time, I saw uncertainty in her face. Not the confident woman from the boardroom. Not the person who controlled every situation. Just Victoria. A woman who didn't know what to do next. I pulled my hand back. We should probably remember why we're doing this, I said. She looked away. Right. But her voice didn't sound convinced. Before either of us could say anything else, her phone rang. The sound cut through the room. Victoria looked at the screen. Her entire body stiffened. I watched the confidence return to her face like a mask being placed back on. Hello? She listened silently. Then her expression changed. A mixture of shock and something I couldn't understand. What are you doing here? My chest tightened. She ended the call without saying goodbye. Who was it? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, there was a knock at the apartment door. 3 slow knocks. Victoria froze. I had never seen her look afraid before. Daniel, she said softly. I stood up. Who is it? She looked at the door. Then back at me. And the answer in her eyes told me everything. Someone from her past had found her. Someone who could destroy everything we were pretending not to feel. The door opened. And before I could see who was standing outside, Victoria reached for my hand. Not because we were married. Not because we had to pretend. But because, in that moment, she didn't want to face them alone. The moment the door opened, I expected to see someone who looked dangerous. Someone angry. Someone who would come in and destroy the fragile balance Victoria and I had created. But the man standing there wasn't what I imagined. He was calm. Confident. The kind of person who looked like he had never been told no. Victoria's hand tightened around mine. And that told me more than words ever could. Victoria, he said. She didn't answer. The silence between them felt heavier than any argument. Then his eyes moved to me. And I assume this is the reason you stopped answering my calls. My stomach tightened. I wanted to say something. I wanted to explain. But I wasn't sure what my place was. That was the hardest part. I was her husband on paper. But was I anything more? Victoria stepped forward. Daniel is my husband. The man smiled slightly. Not surprised. Almost amused. For how long? The question hit harder than it should have. Because even though we both knew the answer, hearing it from someone else made it feel different. Victoria's expression changed. 1 year. The man nodded slowly. Of course. After he left, the apartment felt smaller. Too quiet. Victoria stood near the window, staring outside. I watched her shoulders drop slightly. The strong woman everyone knew was gone. You never told me who he was, I said. She didn't turn around. I was going to. When? No answer. I looked away. Because I didn't want my voice to reveal how much it bothered me. Not because of him. Because I realized I cared. And I had no right to. You think this is just about him? She asked quietly. I looked back. What else is it about? She finally faced me. Her eyes were tired. He knows every version of me except the one I am now. I stayed silent. He knew me before the company. Before the money. Before everyone started expecting me to be perfect. Her voice cracked slightly. And when he came back, I thought maybe I missed something. Maybe I was the reason everything fell apart. That was the first time I saw her blame herself. Not the billionaire. Not the boss. Just Victoria. You don't have to prove anything to him, I said. A small, sad smile appeared on her face. You always do that. Do what? Make me feel like I'm not difficult to understand. The words stayed between us. I wanted to tell her that I didn't see her as difficult. I wanted to tell her that somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like an arrangement. But fear held me back. Because saying it would change everything. Daniel, she whispered. I looked at her. She stepped closer. Not enough to touch. Just enough that I could feel how much she wanted to say something. I need to ask you something. My heartbeat felt louder than the rain outside. What? She looked into my eyes. And for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she asked the one question I had been trying not to answer myself. If this marriage was real, would you still choose me? I didn't answer her question immediately. Not because I didn't know. Because I knew. And that scared me more. If this marriage was real, would you still choose me? Victoria stood there waiting, and for once, she wasn't hiding behind confidence or control. She was giving me a chance to hurt her. I opened my mouth. Then stopped. Because before I could say anything, my phone started ringing. The timing felt almost cruel. I looked down at the screen. It was my old manager from the company. I almost ignored it. But something about the urgency made me answer. Daniel, he said quickly, Where are you? You need to see this. My eyebrows tightened. See what? There was a pause. Then he lowered his voice. Someone leaked the marriage agreement. My entire body went still. Victoria noticed my expression. What happened? I ended the call and looked at her. For the first time since I met her, I saw fear cross her face. Not fear of losing money. Not fear of losing reputation. Something deeper. They know, I said. She didn't ask who. She already understood. Within an hour, the internet had turned our private arrangement into a public story. Articles. Comments. Opinions from people who didn't know anything about us. They called me a gold digger. They called Victoria desperate. They said our marriage was nothing but a business deal. And maybe the worst part was, they weren't completely wrong. At least, they weren't wrong about how it started. Victoria sat quietly on the couch, staring at her phone. I'm sorry, she whispered. I looked at her. For what? For bringing you into this. I sat beside her. You didn't force me. No, she said softly. But I didn't tell you everything either. The way she said it made me realize there was more. Something she had been carrying alone. What aren't you telling me? She took a deep breath. Then she reached for a folder on the table. Inside were documents. Old documents. My name was written on one of them. I looked at her, confused. Why is my name here? Victoria looked away. Because before you became my assistant, I knew who you were. The room went silent. What? She swallowed. Years ago, before my company became what it is now, I met your father. My heart stopped. My father? She nodded slowly. He helped me when I had nothing. He believed in me when nobody else did. I stared at the papers. You hired me because of him? No. Her answer came immediately. I hired you because of you. She moved closer. But when I saw your name on your application, I remembered the person who once helped me. And I was afraid I only saw your fathering you. I didn't know what hurt more. That she knew something about my past. Or that she thought she had to hide it. Victoria. Her eyes filled with regret. I didn't want you to think you were here because of the debt I owed. I looked at her. And for the first time, I understood. This wasn't about the contract. It wasn't about her ex. It wasn't even about the marriage. It was about two people who were terrified that the one person who truly saw them might only see a reason to leave. I reached for her hand. But before I could say anything, she pulled back slightly. Daniel. Her voice trembled. There's something else. I waited. She looked at our hands. Then whispered the words that changed everything. The 1-year agreement wasn't my idea. The 1-year agreement wasn't my idea. Her words stayed in the air. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe for a second. What do you mean? Victoria looked down. It was my lawyer's suggestion. The board wanted me married because they thought it would make me look more stable after everything that happened with my previous relationship. She paused. And I agreed because it was easier than admitting the truth. What truth? Her eyes met mine. That I was tired. The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. Tired of everyone wanting something from me. Tired of people looking at my success but never asking if I was okay. She swallowed. Then you walked into my office one day, spilled coffee on $1 million report, apologized 20 times, and somehow still worried more about my assistant who looked exhausted than yourself. I almost smiled. That was a very embarrassing day. It was my favorite day in a long time. The room became quiet. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. Victoria looked away. I chose you because I trusted you. I shook my head slightly. You chose me because I reminded you of my father. No. Her answer was immediate. You stayed because you were Daniel. Those words hit harder than anything else she had said. Because deep down, that was the fear I never admitted. That someone like Victoria could never choose someone like me. Not without a reason. Not without an obligation. I took a slow breath. When I first agreed to this marriage, I thought I was helping you. She watched me carefully. But somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about the contract. My voice became quieter. I started waiting for you to come home. I started noticing when you were pretending to be okay. I started wanting to know about your day. Victoria's eyes filled slightly. Daniel. I don't want 1 year. The words came out before I could stop them. I don't want a deal. I don't want to be the person standing beside you because a paper says I should. I reached for her hand. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she squeezed my hand. I was afraid. Of what? Her voice broke. That if I asked you to stay after the year ended, you'd realize you could do better. I looked at her. And finally understood. The woman everyone thought had everything. Was afraid of losing the one thing she never thought she could have. You don't need to be perfect for me, Victoria. A small tear escaped before she looked away. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. And somehow, that made us both smile. Because maybe love was never about knowing exactly what came next. Maybe it was about choosing the person standing in front of you, even when the future was uncertain. Victoria leaned closer. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just two people finally stopping themselves from running away. And when she whispered, "Stay," I knew this time. She wasn't asking because of the agreement. A year ago, I thought a marriage contract was just a piece of paper. A signature. A promise made for convenience. I was wrong. Because the most important thing Victoria and I built was never written in that agreement. It was built in the quiet moments. The late-night conversations. The small smiles across the breakfast table. The times when she stopped pretending she had everything under control, and I stopped pretending I didn't need anyone. After the news about our marriage spread, things were difficult. People judged us. The company questioned Victoria's decisions. Some believed I was only there because of her money. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to prove myself to everyone. I only cared about proving one thing: that what Victoria and I had was real. Her past relationship eventually became nothing more than a closed chapter. The person who came back into her life had reminded her of who she used to be. But I was the person who stood beside her as she became who she wanted to be. And that difference mattered. A few months later, Victoria made a decision that surprised everyone. She stepped away from some of her responsibilities and started building a life that belonged to her, not one designed by expectations, investors, or people who thought they knew what was best. And I did the same. I stopped seeing myself as someone who was lucky to be noticed. I realized I deserved to be chosen. Not because of my usefulness. Not because of my past. But because of who I was. On the day our one-year agreement officially ended, Victoria placed the original contract on the table. I expected her to tear it up. Instead, she folded it carefully and put it away. "Why keep it?" I asked. She smiled. "Because it reminds me of the moment I almost made the biggest mistake of my life." "What mistake?" She looked at me. "Thinking I needed a contract to make someone stay." I didn't have an answer. I just reached for her hand. Because after everything, we both understood something. Love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees your flaws, your fears, your unfinished parts, and still chooses to stay. Victoria was no longer the untouchable billionaire everyone admired from a distance. And I was no longer the invisible assistant standing in the background. We were just two people who found each other at the wrong time, in an unusual way. And somehow made it the right one. Sometimes the person who changes your life isn't the person you expected. Sometimes they are the person who notices the things everyone else ignores. The question is, would you have believed a one-year marriage agreement could turn into something real? Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?